The Force is strong with you.
You must stop Vader.
I don't understand why you never mentioned that you had the Force.
Knox, a StarWars.com contributor and a huge Star Wars fan, and we're here today to talk about Vader Immortal coming to PlayStation VR. I'm joined by an incredible panel of guests here to join me. Let's start with some introductions. If you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role on Vader Immortal. So let's start with director Ben Snow.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Ben Snow. I directed Vader Immortal. I was also a visual effects supervisor, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. And next, let's talk to writer and executive producer David Goyer.
Hi, and as you said, writer and executive producer of The Experience.
Hi, I'm Marissa Martinez-Hoadley. I was QA on Vader Immortal.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Miller. I'm the executive creative producer at ILMxLAB and the executive producer on Vader Immortal.
And just to get started, David, if you could give us a high-level overview of Vader Immortal, maybe for somebody who's never seen it before?
Vader Immortal is an interactive VR series in 3 parts that fills in a period of Vader's life that is previously unknown. It takes place shortly before the time of Rogue One, and it takes place on Mustafar, which is the planet in which Anakin was transformed into Vader. And it takes place in and around a giant monolith, Darth Vader's castle, his home. And it explores what Vader's doing when he's not force choking people at the Emperor's behest.
Which is often.
Yes.
And Ben, could you talk a little bit about who the player is in Vader Immortal?
Oh, yeah, you play a smuggler. When the story opens, you're on the run from Hutt gangsters with your droid companion Zoe in your ship, the Windfall, and Vader pulls you out of orbit and pulls you down to Mustafar. And it turns out you actually have a link to this through an ancient lineage, and Vader needs you to help his own nefarious ends. So initially, he sort of essentially presses you into service. And then, of course, as his intent becomes clearer over the course of the story, you find yourself as an ally and then in confrontation with him.
And David, why did you pick Vader and Mustafar in particular for this story?
Well, I was approached by the Lucas Story Group, God, it's almost 4 years ago now, to start exploring the idea of telling a VR story. And fairly quickly, we settled upon Vader. We knew we wanted it to involve an iconic character, and we were interested in also exploring fear and, different areas of the Star Wars universe. And when they told me that we could use Vader, we got the approval. I mean, I was thrilled because the story is also canon in terms of what we're doing. And it just seemed like this was an opportunity because of VR. VR really gives you a sense of presence in a way that no other medium does. So for the opportunity to have you, the player, the user, actually experience what it's like to be in a Star Wars world, that's something that children, certainly even when I was a kid, we used to fight with lightsabers with sticks. So many people have fantasized about doing this, and our VR series is really the closest you can get to that actually happening.
Yeah, and Mustafar is a really beautiful, interesting place. Lots of great visual opportunities there. And in a way, by sneaking around Vader's castle, who we had seen in Rogue One, even though the story predates it, you get a chance to spy on Vader, and in a way that you just wouldn't be able to in a film. You don't have that sort of sense of being part of it, and so it allows us. We were interested in exploring how you could relate to him in a different way, maybe than you could just watching on a screen.
I would also say when we first started, we had the opportunity to go to the archives and to sift through, all of the art for the original trilogy and the prequels. And there's all these wonderful designs in many cases, because the designers continue working over the years, lots of designs that never made it into the final product. And we were particularly intrigued by some early designs for Vader's castle, which, if I remember correctly, originally took place in it was on a snowy mountaintop, and it was meant to be used for some scenes in Empire Strikes Back. Obviously, it never made it into the movie, but we became really intrigued with that, and that was the initial impetus.
You use the words experience a lot to talk about this story. Mark, how would you say this is different from a video game?
We pay a lot of attention to balancing for the experiencer. We pay a lot of attention to balancing between doing things and seeing things. So you'll go for a while listening to a character, and then there's a lot of interactive parts to it that you have to do and slightly puzzle your way out of things, or interact and battle your way out of things. And that's the beauty of a VR experience, is you get to do both.
But we wanted, it was actually a balance, right, David? Like, we were exploring how much we could be giving you story and how much the character could be talking to you. But we really wanted it to feel like you were stepping inside one of the movies and that you were a part of it. And so we didn't want to block you or make it like hard, but we wanted you to be doing enough that you felt, oh, I'm part of this story and I can interact with the world and enjoy that. But we didn't want that to be what it was about. It wasn't a game. It was really saying, oh, there's some stuff to make you feel like you're involved and part of the thing. But, if you get stuck, then Zoe is going to give you a prompt, or, we're not going to, we really wanted you to have the fun of experiencing whatever your activity was, but not feel frustrated. And so we thought a lot of people are going to be new to VR and that play this. This might be one of their first experiences. Thought a lot about how to make that comfortable.
Absolutely.
Mark, I wanted to ask you, what are you excited about bringing this story to the PlayStation audience?
Oh, what's going to be great for the PlayStation audience is now they can get all 3 episodes at once. There's no waiting in between, so they can jump right from Dojo number 1 to Dojo number 2 and into 3. They can go right from the end of Ep 1 into the start of 2, and that'll be really enjoyable for everyone. And we're excited about seeing the response and really being able to bring it. The PlayStation audience is so huge, and being able to bring this to that many people and seeing their reactions to it, we can't wait.
So the story takes place over 3 episodes, but there's another part of Vader Immortal I wanted to talk about, and that's the Lightsaber Dojo. And Marissa, I hear that you're the expert on the dojo, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, yeah. So, like David was saying earlier, playing with sticks as lightsabers was, so many people's fantasy at one point. And as we were developing the story mode for Vader Immortal, it became clear that we kind of weren't spending enough time with the lightsaber. So this idea came up of creating a secondary portion of the experience where you could go and hone your skills with the lightsaber to then, go into the story and take on the confrontations that you'd find in there. So while the story is really more narrative-based, the dojo is definitely where you get more of a games aspect, because you have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of enemies to kill. You can earn medals based on how well you do and meeting the time constraints. And then, you win awards like different lightsaber hilts or gloves for your VR hands, and different arenas in episode 1.
Yeah, the beauty of it is you don't have to be, because it wasn't part of the narrative, it didn't have to be part of the greatest Star Wars story. In the story, your character is a character in the Star Wars universe, and so we can't give you infinite powers. You can't, develop the ability to control Force lightning. But in the dojo, we can go crazy with what we let you do. You can wield Darth Maul's lightsaber, and you can use Emperor Force powers. It's that sort of stuff.
Dual lightsabers,
yeah,
like the Ahsoka Tano or Kylo Ren's saber. You can win that if you work hard enough.
Is the dojo the same in each episode, or is there different things you can experience in each one?
Right. So the dojo totally evolves along with the story, right? So in episode 1, you're kind of thrust into this, and you realize in the story, that you might be force sensitive. You definitely have some sort of connection to the greater force, but you're not in tune with it yet. So when you go into the dojo, you have a lightsaber, and that's it. So it's very lightsaber focused. And so we put a lot of work into different ways of dueling with the lightsaber and parrying and reposting. So if you work at it, you can really build up some skills that not only help you get more advanced and win more rewards within episode 1's dojo, but then as you go on to episode 2, you get the Force. You can combine that with your lightsaber skills that you have now, as well as use your imagination and both your hands to just create mayhem. And then in episode 3, it's really a meat grinder with droids. And
Droid grinder.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of went unleashed, if you will, with that one. Yeah. And that's where you get the Force lightning that Ben was talking about. Mm-hmm. And just tons of enemies and combat scenarios.
And I heard a rumor there was an internal dojo tournament that you had?
Yeah, just to generate some fun. And the dojo concept, like I said, it came up, mid-development. So there was this kind of crack, team put on that to just quickly go in there and, work together, cooperate to come up with this new concept and develop it from start to finish in a very short amount of time. And so to relieve some of the stress from that, a contest came up where everyone within the company was encouraged to try and get their best times and write down their best times for all rounds. And if you made it through all 50 rounds and you had the best scores, then you won a Darth Vader lightsaber.
Okay, that's cool.
I didn't participate because I didn't think that was
well, because you ruled, we didn't want to, here's Ella probably getting up to level 3, and I probably got up to 15. No, it's the opposite probably. But
I know, Marissa, you were mentioning parrying and reposting, and I fenced in college, and it definitely brought back some memories playing the Lightsaber Dojo. I was busting out all the moves that I had.
Cool. You have to teach me some of those.
Did you guys know that there's a little bit of Vader Immortal in Rise of Skywalker with the Korvax Fen? There's a little reference to the Vader Immortal story in there. So you guys are really part of the overall Star Wars story, like you were saying.
I had heard Lady Korvax is another character that you'll meet in this experience. She was a much earlier Force practitioner. That's exciting to have sort of added a little bit to the overall Star Wars mythology.
Yeah, we wanted to show areas that hadn't been shown. I mean, I think that's part of Star Wars, showing you sites and places and things that, you don't just want to sort of, let's just do the same sort of thing. So I thought that what David came up with the Korvax mythology, or not mythology, history, was terrific.
That was part of the fun, was when we first saw the designs for that monolith that you see briefly on the outside of in Rogue One, and you see just a little bit of the inside of it in the movie, we realized now we get to design the rest of it, and including what's below it and what's upstairs and everything. So that was part of the exciting journey at the start.
Plus, if you're on Mustafar, right, we briefly, I think, glimpsed these kind of distant Mustafarians in episode 3, I believe. When Anakin, one of those. But once we realized that our experience was going to take place largely in Mustafar, we had to flesh out who the Mustafarians were, their culture, their history. They're not just extras in this experience. You meet a priestess, you meet a number of different Mustafarians. And so that was fun to flesh out that world as well.
David, going back to the story, could you talk a little bit about the characters that we'll meet during the experience?
Well, one of the first characters you meet is Zoe, who's a droid and your assistant, best friend, comrade in arms, fellow smuggler. And she's someone that's very useful because we build empathy with her, and because you, the user, can't speak, often she can voice some of the questions that you might have, or she can give you little nudges in order to perform a certain task. We're also going to meet Carius, who is a cyborg who works for Vader. He's like somebody that was in the Imperial Navy that screwed up and kind of got sent to Mustafar to make amends. He's not particularly happy to be in this dark, dank castle with Vader moping around. You'll meet a character called the Priestess, who is a Mustafarian. Another character called Violet, who's another Mustafarian who at one point is a fellow prisoner. There's another interesting character, the Black Bishop, who is very mysterious and scary. The design's very cool on that one. The Black Bishop's really creepy, and I don't want to reveal too much about the Black Bishop, but he's someone that even Vader is a little apprehensive around. So he's also very cool.
That's very cool. Earlier you said some things were a little too scary. Did you mean maybe the Black Bishop? Or I thought Carius was scary personally. Every time he got a little too close, I would back away from him a little bit.
I find the Bishop very scary. If you can get close enough to him, he's got this kind of veil over his face, and it's clear. It's not exactly clear what he is, but you can kind of see behind the veil, and I think users will find him deeply disturbing and a very delicious. My kids were fascinated with him, but Vader himself is also incredibly scary. Vader, that's one of the big discoveries we made, is Vader is much scarier in VR than in any other medium. We did an early beta test with him. We were trying to figure out in VR how much information you could take in from a certain character. In a film or television series, you can sometimes have a character talking for 3 minutes and the audience will be completely held wrapped. But we were concerned that we couldn't do something like that in VR. So we did this little experiment where I wrote, I don't know, maybe it was a minute-long monologue for Vader, or maybe a half-minute-long monologue. And up until that point, you were a fly on the wall. The characters weren't addressing you. The characters weren't looking in your eyes. And so we did this test where Vader walks out of the darkness and addresses you and talks to you. And then we wanted to see for how long, what kind of comprehension people had, what they retained. And I did it. And the first time I did it, and I saw Vader looking at me, I got incredibly scared and I backed up. And I joked to everyone afterwards, but I wrote the thing. And as soon as I took the goggles off, I couldn't remember a damn thing that he'd said because I was so distracted by how scary it was. So we learned that with certain kinds of characters, particularly characters that are really iconic like that and scary, just being in their presence, the experience is so real that you had to be very careful about how much you say. You can only say so much, and then comprehension goes out the window.
Yeah, so we actually had to rearrange the cell block, right, after that a little bit, so that after Vader makes his entrance, we're like, you know what, we kind of have to give you some story before he makes the entrance. Otherwise, you're just not going to absorb any of it. So I think we ended up having Zoe and Violet do a little bit of an exchange to talk a little bit about oh, you have some mysterious thing here. Or it was a little bit after, that's right. But instead of Vader telling you all this. Yeah.
We also changed, if you remember, the first time at one point as the user, you're in this cell, and the first time Vader walked in fairly quickly. And we realized, oh, it's so much more dramatic if this door opens and there's this long hallway and you hear the breathing and he's slowly approaching you and you have this sort of experience of mounting dread. And that's just one of countless examples of ways that we just had to keep sort of fine-tuning the experience, because being in VR really is like you are in the location, you are in the world, and that's just it makes the parameters very different.
And we brought that first scene of Vader to Star Wars Celebration and had lines of booths with people all doing it at the same time, and it was great. Just you could stand outside there and watch people, and everybody's reaction when he first walks into them and he walks right up to them. They're either taking a step back or at least shrinking, and you see them looking up and you know exactly what's happening. It's so fun to watch everybody's first reaction to that moment.
Oh, yeah. And when they picked up the lightsaber, because in that demo, they had the lightsaber, and everyone gets into the pose that they've seen in the films. Like, you don't have someone
Jedi sort of comes out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we put a lot of work into that, because initially, actually, when I came on the project, which was probably a year or two after these tests that David, Ben, and Mark were talking about, for me, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. The lightsaber means so much to me. So I came in and everything was kind of designed around one-handed lightsaber, because when you're developing a game, like you develop a system and the engineer has to like iterate on that system. So it was just easier for them to like have the lightsaber in one hand and then their other hand doing engineering things. So when I came in, I noticed that, hey, the lightsaber is very like just kind of geared for one hand, and although I can pass it between the two, like it doesn't work if I try to block blasters. The blade doesn't know what hand has ownership. So it would like uncover bugs like that, just like having that, foreknowledge of the lore of Star Wars. You could find bugs all throughout the story where, because of the nature of development, we couldn't adhere to things you would expect in canon, but then eventually got to iron them out. And it was pretty cool.
Had to have both hands, right? Like a Jedi.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to stand like this, right? Like, it's a no-brainer.
So where Vader is very scary, I have to say Zoe is super funny and lovable and endearing. So, David, if you could talk a little bit about the inspiration behind Zoe, or Z0E3, I think is her full name.
Well, we knew that we wanted the experience to be often scary and suspenseful. And one of the other stretch goals of the experience is even beyond that, if we could get you to actually feel for Vader a little bit as well, which I think, we've successfully done. But we also knew that we needed to give the audience a break, and there needed to be some levity. And Star Wars has had this incredible tradition of using droids for just that purpose, for being the companion, for being the comic relief. So fairly quickly, we came up with the idea of doing a droid. We liked the idea of a female droid, and we started crafting her, Zoe's personality. And once we had a draft or two of the episodes, we started talking about, well, who would be perfect to play Zoe? And I remember us being in that early room, and almost immediately the name Maya Rudolph came up, and she immediately shot up to the top of the list. And as is often the case in Hollywood, it was a very circuitous route to Maya, and we heard that she was busy, she couldn't do it, whatnot. And then I think our dates pushed a little, and I think we said, well, we should try again. And at this point, it had been months and months. And then somehow her schedule opened up and the stars aligned and it worked. And we ended up getting Maya to play Zoe. And that almost never happens when you're doing a project, that you get the person that you'd first, written down on the list. And she was incredible because when we would do the voice recordings for her, we would do 2 or 3 different sessions for each episode. So we would record the lines as written, and Ben and Mark would go back with the rest of the team, and they would sort of refine the mechanics and the visuals. And then, but we also encouraged Maya to ad-lib. We were hoping she would ad-lib. And many times she came up with things that were incredibly funny.
Oh, Shavit. Shavit, Captain? Who knew you were an ace with a lightsaber, huh? Whoa!
We were able to sort of reverse engineer that and make that work, in the build out of the experience. So again, that was working with Maya was kind of this call and response experience that was really wonderful.
And speaking of Maya, she sent through a little message for everybody that we wanted to share.
Hi, everyone. It's Maya Rudolph. I just wanted to pop in here quickly to say how much fun I had working with the team at ILMxLAB and being a part of Vader Immortal. It was a dream come true to voice my now personal favorite droid, ZOE3, otherwise known as Zoe 3. I hope this experience is everything you dreamed it would be and more. And I'm excited for more fans to be able to go on an amazing adventure with me. Well, Zoe, by your side. Bye.
Mark, could you talk a little bit about what it was like to bring this character to life with Maya in VR?
I think, as David was saying, the great thing about Maya was we could give her an attitude or a mood that we wanted her to be in, and she would feed lines and riff around that thing. And then it gave us a ton to work with. And because it's VR, you need more than just the regular dialogue. You need nags and prompts if you need someone to leave the room at that point, or they can't figure out which way they're going or what to pick up. She was great at doing it, very sweetly, and then doing it with a little edge to it, and then doing it to, with a good amount of attitude in there. So it's a wonderful experience to get to work with her.
Yeah, she was fascinated because her kids are huge Star Wars fans, of course, and she was fascinated with the Star Wars curse words or the expletives that Zoe could do, and she'd be like, "Oh, what's another one we could try?" And we had our story team in the back.
We had a list of sort of approved Star Wars curse words, and then we would make up some of our own on the spot, and different people would weigh in as to whether or not that was Star Wars appropriate. But the other funny thing about her nags is, because I've worked on a couple of video games, is nags are something that people that play, the gamers, are familiar with, and often the nags become just that. They nag you. They become boring. But in the case of Maya's, if the users are going through the experience and they're having particular difficulty with something, or they're just taking their time, her nags got funnier and funnier and funnier. Yeah. And so much so that I was in the room recording with her. The rest of the team were often in this soundproof booth, and I definitely ruined quite a few takes by just cracking up. I think you were in with me sometimes as well, Ben.
Yeah, I ruined a couple of takes. Yeah. But, what's the one? Marissa, you'll have to correct me on this, but I think when you're trying to wipe the ship's memory near the beginning of the experience, and the first time she gives you a gentle, you need to put your hand on the touchpad and stuff, and then, if you fail at it 2 or 3 times, she's like, "Put your cripping hand on the cripping touchpad, Captain."
Yeah, that's right.
Like, wow, I wanted to play through just to fail and get the prompt.
She also she enjoyed making Ben tell her how to pronounce Star Wars words with an Australian accent, so then she could just mess with that too. So that she had some fun with that.
One of the great aspects of this is the collaboration process. So Maya would give us a bunch of extra stuff, and then we'd go back and, God, this is gold. How do we integrate this? And then we'd be doing the motion capture with Julie Nathanson, who played the body performance, and she would be able to take that and twist it around. And then it was kind of just, it's actually one of the things that was really enjoyable and very different from a film process for sure, where you sort of have this blend just to try and arrive at the best, most fun moment you can.
So design-wise, did you try to make her look different than other droids that we might be familiar with, like K2 or L3?
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, I think that was one of the real joys of the design process, was we got to go through reams of materials of all the droids that had ever been designed for Star Wars, not just the ones that made the cut into the project. So there's tons of artwork from over the years that we got to look at, and Ben helped us narrow in on the final form there by looking at everything
Aaron
that gone
McBride,
before.
as our production designer, sort of did the bulk of the heavy lifting on Zoe, and just the elements that went into her. We sort of had a sort of general look, and we really liked this idea of a sort of band around her eyes, and then some cables coming out almost like she had sort of hair hanging down. And then, we sort of said, well, she's a little, she's streamlined and she floats, so let's put in a little bit of Pan Am blue on her arm and this sort of thing. And then one of her arms is, the player's character and Zoe are smugglers, and they don't always have a lot of money. So she has an arm that they sort of picked up on, some at some market somewhere that isn't really, the official arm for her model, but it's
Standard issue.
aftermarket parts.
Before we go, I wanted to ask everybody if you have a favorite memory or story from your time working on Vader Immortal.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's tons of them. But I think one thing that really, really stands out, aside from all of the great experiences working with the team, was just that, I would spend hours playing this thing over and over and over again during the week. And once the Force was introduced in the game, I would spend all week using the Force and then go home on the weekend and sit on my couch, and the remote control would be way over there, and I couldn't get it, right? Because I couldn't get it. Like all week I'd been able to get it, but not on the weekend. So that was one of the fun things for me, is that like it really feels so real in VR to be able to use the Force. Like I think we did such a good job on that tuning that you actually miss it when you're not in there.
To me, it's been the Vader of it all, the whole experience. I think from the start, where we decided that that's who we were going to focus on. That was a pretty quick conversation. There was a few other names, but once somebody said, let's do a Vader story, everyone just said yes. That's what we have to do. And then going over to the set at Rogue One and watching the shoot there, being able to see what they interpreted as the inside of that monolith, and the performance of Vader in that, and how we were going to riff off of that, and then all the way to then standing there the first time with him in VR and feeling that presence. And as David said, part of our journey was also to try to give you a little behind the scenes of him. We know what he was doing in his professional life working for the Emperor, but no one had talked about during those years on Mustafar, what was he up to personally, and what was he trying to get at? And we got to fill in that blank. So that was super fun, and a lot of back and forth and bad ideas, and then that finally became good ones. So all of that journey to bring him there, and then to finally be able to literally stand in the same room with him, was an amazing thing.
How about you, Ben?
When Vader walks in the experience itself, it's definitely, when I love the moment when Vader walks in, but sort of when you get a chance to spy on him and he's going through some personal stuff and you get a bit of a glimpse, it just felt like doing that, we gave you something that you just wouldn't be able to do in a different medium. And so it was kind of thrilling to be playing with that sort of stuff. But in terms of developing the experience, I would say, we were working on a battle for the third episode in the hangar, and the designer on that section of the experience was Ian Bowie, and he came up to me and he said, "Look, we had the environment team make these thermal detonators that we want to have in crates, sort of sitting around on the thing." And I'm like, "Well, Ian, yeah, you know what? You can't put a thermal detonator in there because everyone will want to throw it." And Ian's like, "Well, actually, one of the engineers on their own time sort of has come up with this," and he throws the thing in VR. And I'm like, "Okay, great." So, I mean, that was the great thing about the team and the contribution. Everyone really wanted to make this as fun as they could, and I just loved that moment. It was just, oh.
And finally, David.
In terms of making it, I would say it was really fun for me to also, again, without revealing too much, to delve into some Star Wars lore that had taken place not just hundreds of years ago, but maybe thousands of years ago, and to color in some areas of the Star Wars universe that at least filmically have only really been sketched upon. So that was really fun and really exciting for me as a Star Wars fan. But I would say in the real world, so to speak, the coolest experience for me was when we brought it to Celebration a couple of years ago, and we set up this booth that you'd alluded to, and we were watching people experience the prototype, and it was amazing to watch people take the Jedi stance, but so many people after they took the goggles off had tears in their eyes. And that alone was such an incredibly moving experience, because that was the experience that I had the first time I tested it. And that was something powerful and something that I'm never going to forget.
I think I cried a little too, actually. And I walked into the wall when Darth Vader showed up. So you guys definitely made a very immersive experience.
Excellent.
I backed away. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. That was really fun to talk about.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
The Force is strong with you.